In this video, we're going to be talking about modal or modal dialogues. And they're a nice way to have a triggered event that pops up some kind of messaging on the screen that I would say just kind of like flops on top of your page. Other kinds of overlays kind of maybe hover around a button or, in proximity to something else. A modal is kind of like if you had, if you had like a table, right? And the table was your website and you just dropped a picture or whatever on top of it and it just appeared. That may be a terrible example. I'm recording this kind of late, so my examples are kind of dry right now. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at the documentation and then we're going to do some coding to show you how these are in motion. So let's just get to reading and seeing what these are all about and how to set them up. And so it says, for modal dialog, it's a dialog, or a dialog is a window overlaid on either the primary window or another dialog window. Content behind the modal dialog is inert, meaning the users cannot interact with it. And because Chakra is customizable, that's not entirely true, but out of the gate, you can't interact with it. And so we have all these things coming in here. We have the modal, we have the overlay, content, header, footer, body, and close button. They all do essentially what they sound like they do, but I think it's more important to see how they're assembled together. So in this example, we have this, and it says when the modal opens, the focus is sent into the modal and set to the first tabbable item. If there are no tabbable items, focus is set to the modal content itself. So what we have right here is this button. We have this use disclosure, and this is a Chakra UI hook. So if you're just dropping into this video out of nowhere and you haven't seen the rest of the series, this is in the library. It's basically a way of giving the open and close functionality and then also storing the state. Here is a Boolean value just so you don't have to do it yourself. And so we have this button right here when we click it on open, so it's opening up. And then we have the modal, which is where our focus is. And so we have the modal, which wraps everything. And then we have the modal overlay, which seems to, not wrap anything here because it kind of closes in and on itself, which is kind of odd. When I was first typing this out, I actually wrapped everything in the modal overlay and it didn't quite behave how I expected it to. So don't let that trip you up right there. And then the next thing that wraps everything is the modal content. And so then we have a header. So let's go ahead and click this. We have a header that says modal title, and then we have this, close button right here. So we have the modal header right here, which is what we saw. And then we have the close button, and these two are essentially in the same row right here. So that's how we make that. And then we have the body, and we have lorem. I believe this is, and this is what's kind of frustrating, is that this is not a Chakra component, at least one that I'm aware of in any way. This seems to be a custom component brought in. And so this lorem count 2 is for 2 paragraphs right here. So it's doing the lorem thing here to do 2 quick paragraphs, but in reality, you could have put 2 boxes, 2, things of text in here and would work the same. So don't spin your wheels on this. This is just saying, hey, you could put stuff inside of the body and it will appear right here. So then the footer is this next row. And so we have a button and then we have another button on here. And then one button has the on click, which, closes the whole thing. But you could also, click off of the modal itself to close the page. So that's fine as well. And that's essentially how you set these things up. I do recommend trying to put them maybe in their own, container or file, because these things could, if you have more than one, could fill out your page rather quickly and makes everything hard to read. So next up, we could control the focus when the modal closes. And so when the dialog closes, it returns focus to the element that triggered it. So it's going to go from here to the modal, whatever is tabbable. And then when it closes, it comes back to the button. So what we want to do is set the final focus ref prop to change the element that should receive focus when the modal closes. And I think there's an example later on where you could open this, close the modal, and then the ref or the focus point will move to another part of your page if you want to. But for now, we have one button, and then we have, one modal. So we're going to click this, we're going to close it, and the focus comes back here. You can't really tell because this is just a gray button. There's no special kind of styling going on to show that it has the focus, but that's what's going on here. So if we look at the code, we have this use ref, which is final ref right here. And so we have this, ref equals final ref. So maybe I was a bit wrong there. We were talking about the button, but really it's this box up here that's receiving the focus on there, which is still kind of weird to me because you can't really tell that the focus has gone there. But anyways, you click this, close that, and then the reference or focus is supposed to come here. So we have the final focus ref right here, which is using this use ref. And so this means that when this closes down in the on close, this is going to send attention to this box right here. And that's all it's really doing. I think this will be more clear in a couple sections down below. And so here we have block scrolling when the modal opens. It says for accessibility, it's recommended to block scrolling on the main document behind the modal. Chakra does this by default, but we could set block scroll on mount to false to allow scrolling behind the modal. So if we want to scroll, we could scroll like this. That's pretty cool, right? That could get pretty annoying though if you have scrolling stuff inside of your modal, and then you're essentially able to scroll two parts of your web page, and not everyone's phone or device is created equally. Maybe some have cracks, don't respond that well. So just be cautious. If we were to come up here, I'm trying to scroll with my mouse wheel right now, and I can't. If I was to come down here, because this block scroll mount is set to false, I can move it up and down freely. So you just come in here and drop it in the modal component up here, which is the most parental, I guess you would say, one. And yeah, you have that ability now. And so this is the interesting one right here. So it says Chakra automatically sets focus to the first tabbable element in the modal. However, there might be scenarios where you need to manually control where focus goes. And so Chakra provides two props for this use case. And this is what I was referencing earlier about moving the focus around. This isn't 100% one-to-one of what I was referencing earlier, but this is just showing that you have control of shifting the focus as you interact and close these modals. So we have in here open modal. Let's just click cancel, and it goes straight to this I'll receive focus. And you can tell it has focus because of the blue outline here. And so what we have is the use disclosure, which I've stated earlier is the basically toggles this is open method from true to false. And then we have an initial ref, and then we have a final ref here. And so this I'll receive focus right here is the final ref. We've already seen how to do the initial ref, but because we're using the final focus right here, it's going to focus where am I going to go when this thing closes is what this line is asking. And it's going to look inside of your components and say, oh, I'm going to receive the focus when this is over. So final focus is going straight to here. So yeah, that's how you were to use a prop like that. And so here we have close modal on overlay click. By default, the modal closes when you click its overlay. You can set close on overlay click to false if you want the modal to stay visible. So you notice I'm like clicking around it, clicking away, and I can't leave it until I hit cancel or whatever the functionality is that brings this modal to a close here. We could also center these things. And so we have right here is centered. So this centers it right in the middle of the page. I personally like that. I think that makes sense. And maybe it doesn't if you're on a desktop, but if you're on like a smaller device, it's almost like, why not have it? I just think it looks smoother, but that's just my opinion. So you just put the is center inside of the modal here. And so we have transitions as well. So as we do this, we click it and we see it kind of comes from the bottom. And so inside of the modal component, we have this motion preset, and we could do slide in bottom, slide in right, scale or none. So let's just copy this right here. And we see it kind of comes from the right. If you like the stylistic, aspect of it, you could feel free to. You could even come in here and do none. Let's see how interesting this one is. Yeah, and it just appears on the screen. So I guess if you want a little bit of style with the motion preset, you could play with it there, but I don't think there's a whole lot of configuration you could do. So do with this what you want. And so this is interesting too. So we have the modal overflow behavior. So if the content within the modal overflows beyond the viewport, you can use the scroll behavior to control how scrolling should happen. So if it's set to inside, the scroll only occurs within the modal body. If it's set to outside, the modal content will scroll within the viewport. Okay, that's a bunch of words. What does it mean? So we have a lot of lorem ipsum that's about ready to occur. So 15 paragraphs are coming in here. And there's state, there's all this other stuff going on. We've already covered how to handle some of this. I do always recommend, even if you look at a video, go to the documentation, because this is really good documentation. And so if we keep it inside, we see that we could scroll, it's like such and such is terms of service, it's like we're gonna sell your home, we're gonna, call the cops on you if you pirate this stuff, you click OK, and then you go about your business, right? Whatever, mumbo jumbo it says in here. But if we click outside, now we have to scroll the whole page, it seems like, the whole viewport. Even though we're not scrolling behind it, obviously, we have to scroll like this. And I like that it gives us the outside as an option. I'm always one for options, but I think the inside is much cleaner. And I think you would agree or agree to that as well. And then we have different size modals. So if we're coming into the modal here, we could come into the size and choose what our size is. And this is just a way of using a map and plopping out all the different buttons and what's opening up and all that other stuff. So don't mind this so much, but we should really focus on how big or small some of these are. So this is an extra small modal, tiny little guy right here, but it's still, I think, decent enough for most cases. I think you would agree. We have the small. Let's jump up to the extra large. So it's more like wide than it is like, narrow and long or whatnot. So if you wanted to go between this or this, it really just is, the dimensions at that point. Where are you shifting it at? And then the full one, which is this big boy right here, is probably getting cut off. You have to use escape to, at least on my keyboard, to jump out of it. And so, yeah, I don't know when you would want to use a full screen modal. To me, that would kind of scare me and makes it think that, maybe someone is hacking my computer. But yeah, large, I think, was what I would typically go for. And so we have other things in here you can read on over about the focus trapping, accessibility, more stuff about the ARIA, props. But what I recommend is just diving in and doing the code. And then as you need to learn, grow, and do new things, just refer back to what it says here. But let's get to just doing some fun coding. We're just going to make a basic modal, and we're going to use one of the specialized chakra hooks that they give you in the library to close and open it. So without further ado, let's get to coding. One thing before I continue, I think this is it with the modals. I am actually recording the snippets before I record going over the docs, even though I've already looked at the docs. Because of that discrepancy, I do believe modals are one of the 2 or 3 components where you don't want to directly place it in the under the chakra provider directly. So what I'm going to be doing is closing this down and actually making another component up here. And then I'm going to be loading it straight into where this is. So that way everything works properly. Alrighty, so I forgot the button. So if you saw this action right here, you're like, how did he type so fast? I just copy and pasted it from the snippet example I have. So let's break this out a little bit. We know what the box is doing. It's just kind of holding everything in here together. So we have the modal, which is the most, parental, I guess you would say, component. And then in here we have the overlay, which let's go ahead and click that. We have the overlay here. And then we have the content on the inside. We have the header, and this says the header of the modal that's appearing right here. The modal close button right next door. Click it, and it closes. You notice there's like nothing in here. Like there's no on clicks. There's no any of that, right? There's none of that junk you have to jam into your code. It just, look at this. You click modal close button. It just knows you want to close it. That is pretty cool, I gotta say. It's not like, sliced bread or anything, a reinvention of that or the invention of the wheel, but it just makes it easier to skim your code. And so we have the modal body. I can't be out here mopping at Wendy's. I heard that line at a song recently and I thought it was funny. So we have the body in there, and you can put more things in the body as you want to. I'm just doing a small example here. And then we have the footer, and then the footer, you're typically going to have a call to action. So most likely a button, accept, deny, cancel, delete. In this case, you're going to call in sick because you don't want to go to work. You want to be on tech Twitter getting all the followers. That's what you want to do. So we're going to call in sick right here. And so let's look at this use disclosure. Now there's going to be another tutorial on this, which I hope you all catch out. But we have is open, which is this Boolean value here. And then we have this, which does on open. And then we have on close. And what these are essentially doing in a nutshell is toggling the value of the Boolean state. So when we have on open, when we click it, that's why it turns on. It just switches is open to true. And then you notice on close here for the modal when it's clicked, like what functionality is handling it closing. And also in the button here, we have on close twice. And so that's how we're able to close this thing down, is the use of this hook. Now, could you write your own hook and streamline this in another way? You totally can, but it's cool that this library gives you that functionality. But this is the first example in using modals. And the next one we're going to do is we're going to allow for scrolling when the screen is open. So what if you have just a bunch of crap in the back, and how do you, scroll, which I think is a useful feature. And then how to center, do transition stuff and other scroll behavior. So hope to see y'all in a couple seconds. I shouldn't record these this late in the day. So in this section, what we're going to do is retain everything we did in the previous one, because when we start getting into the multi-component thing, especially for these library tutorial series that I do now and do in the future, I want to keep things as atomic as possible. So really all I'm going to do is add more attributes instead of modal here, but what I'm going to do is actually copy and paste, because this be ridiculous for me to just dump all up in my code, or at least type it all out, I should say. I'm going to put this all in here. I'm going to save. So we have all this junk right here. And this is just lorem ipsum, and it's just straight gibberish. And actually, let me go ahead and copy and paste some more of this so we actually get a scroll bar going. So we have the scroll bar going. All right. So all you need to know is that I got a giant block of text. What is in that text doesn't matter. It could be pictures, other Chakra components, whatever it may be. The content here doesn't matter. Just know you kind of want like a scroll bar's worth for this example if you're following along. So we're going to come up here and do, okay, modal. First thing we're going to do is block scroll on mount. What does this do? Well, let's go ahead and set this to false here. We're going to open this up. As you can see, we could still scroll. That's pretty cool. Now, if we set this to true to block it, we could scroll right there as you saw, but we can't scroll now. Now, you may have different strategic reasons for this, maybe even depending upon their mobile size, right? You may find that your content, there's too many clickable things. They may accidentally click out of this very easily on a smaller screen. So you may want to restrict that access when they're on certain kinds of viewports or whatnot. So just because you can doesn't mean you should. And if you can do it, try to be a bit strategic here. The next thing we could do is we could come in here and do is centered. And now it appears smack dab in the middle of the page, all centered, and it looks cool and stuff like that. And this is pretty nice too. Once again, whatever you or your design team or developer team think is best and gives the most meaning, put it wherever it works. And then the last thing I want to show you here is the motion preset here. It sounds really fancy, but it's really just how does the dialogue, or the modal I should say, get introduced. And we can see we have a bunch of options here. So let's try doing scale. So it looks like it just pops straight up, kind of like it normally does. Some of these animations happen quickly, so even if there is a little bit of nuance, it's hard for at least me sometimes to really see the difference. So after scale, slide in bottom. We can make some jokes there. And we see it does pop up from the bottom very, very quickly. The other one, it all at a time just kind of comes up. You could see it actually for a split second popping up from the bottom. And then slide in right. And then you can see it, in a brief window there coming from the right. So this is a small example on how you use modals. I appreciate y'all watching this stuff. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all in the next video.